Welcome back. So as part of my free time, when I used to have one, I like to refurbish old workstations and old office computers and make them into budget gaming machines. However, I noticed that as time went on, people were less and less interested in these. That got me thinking, can I build something from scratch while being still very competitive? So I went onto the World Wide Web, and this is what I cooked up. Before we start going over all of the components, I want to mention that this build was originally built in October of last year, so prices might have changed slightly, and this might not be the best of the best build for this price anymore, so please keep that in mind. That aside, let's start with the motherboard. Originally, I won this MSI A320 motherboard for 35 euros, including shipping. However, it was dead on arrival. I thought that maybe it is incompatible with my purchased CPU, so I went out and locally bought a Ryzen 3 1200, so I can be 100% certain that the CPU isn't at fault. Of course, it wasn't. Thankfully, the seller was willing to take it back after I explained the situation to him. I tried my luck the second time and landed on this Asus A320 for 40 euros. Finally, everything worked like it was supposed to, even with my CPU. Speaking of which, I was able to score a Ryzen 5 2600 with its stock cooler for around 28 euros. It was quite a while since I last searched for Ryzen CPUs, so I was genuinely surprised how cheap they have become, especially those second gens, and for the performance they can still give in games on a tight budget, they're great. For the memory, I set the budget for 30 euros, which for that I was able to buy 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM for 30 euros new. However, Ryzen CPUs thrive with faster memory, so I wanted to avoid slow RAM kits, and any that were similar spec were almost for the same price as new, so I didn't see a point in buying those if I can have them new. Now, a slight oversight from my part was that the new motherboard doesn't have M.2 slots, which surprised me, but then again, you can't expect much from such a basic motherboard. So I had to stick with an ADATA 1TB SATA SSD that I bought for 61 euros. I don't know if they're the best of the best, however, I've been buying these for years now, and I never had any issues or had any fail on me, so they're good in my book. Last performance relevant part is the GPU, which is the AMD RX 5500 XT that I got for 75 euros. I tried to stick with GPUs that have at least 8 gigs of VRAM, and for such a low price, I think it's great. For the PSU, I got a great deal, 17 euros for a 625 watt PSU, the Lenovo FS8003 to be exact. I believe it came from a pre-build, but that shouldn't affect anything. And finally, the part that was shown the most during the showcase, the case. The Evolvio M5 costing me 44 euros new. Well, it is quite plasticky, it does look decent and is pretty cheap, so I'm willing to ignore these flaws. But it does have a glass side panel, which is nice. Besides the flaws, it's supposed to be a budget build, so it would be pretty weird to go and spend much of my money on a nice case. Now sure, you might say that you could cut even more corners. Maybe you could get slower memory for less, a smaller drive for cheaper, find a used case in the bin for free, and I could go on. However, I tried to build these with the vision of building this for myself, meaning that if I was constrained with such a budget, then I would actually go out and build this for myself and not just to prove a point. With that said, there's one question left standing. Unlike in my previous videos, the results aren't finely skewed by the recording software. I simply just record the footage and then separately record the results. Yeah, such a genius solution, I know. Nonetheless, let's start with God of War 2018. For some reason, full screen didn't work, so I had to have it windowed. With the original settings and the FSR balance preset, you can play at 4K if you don't mind frame rates slightly under 50. For 60, you can either try a lower preset or just turn down the output resolution, just like I did here. It also gave me enough headroom to improve the FSR preset to quality. If you want to avoid using FSR, I suggest sticking to 1080p high. There's no reason to go down lower for more FPS, since you start to get CPU bottleneck. Oh, and just a heads up, get used to hearing that.
We're gonna fight that?
We have no choice.
Okay, just tell me what to do.
Next up is Resident Evil 4 Remake. The game starts off being quite stuttery, but eventually it somewhat clears up and it runs quite well. Not recording also helps quite a bit with not only the frame rate, but the frame times. They are way more stable and you don't see as many hitches. 4K is playable but far from 60 FPS. Even with FSR2 at ultra performance, it hits averages of 46 FPS. To achieve the best performance and quality, I suggest mainly sticking to 1080p or 1440p with more aggressive upscaling. 4K is somewhat out of the picture unless you're fine with 30 to 40 FPS. Apex Legends was heavily CPU bottlenecked, easily visible in the 1080p and 1440p metrics. 4K finally makes a difference where the game had to be set to low to achieve 60 FPS. Of course, it is also possible to make use of the dynamic resolution scaling option in the settings, which would allow you to still have 60 FPS while having better visuals, at the cost of a slight resolution drop. It's quite obvious that 1440p is the best choice in this case. There's no reason to go lower. Another esports title I tested was Counter-Strike 2. The game ran great, even at the highest settings at 4K with FSR quality. If you want to avoid running the game with upscaling, then 1440p is a better choice. Of course, Counter-Strike being an esports title, people will mainly be concerned with performance, not with visual spectacle or resolution. So I lowered the resolution all the way down to 480p to see how much FPS can you get with this machine. The best I got was an average of 111 FPS, meaning that if you still want some eye candy while maintaining the best frame rate possible, then that's the frame rate you should aim for.
We are out of here.
Forza Horizon 5 ran beautifully at 1080p medium with 81 FPS, while at 1440p it still scored 68 FPS. 4K, however, was starting to be too much for the card to handle. Even with FSR2 balance being enabled, it ran at 45 FPS. Of course, if you don't mind playing at 30 FPS, this is absolutely fine, and you can even use higher settings. Speaking of which, I tested ultra settings at 1080p, which was a little too much for this card again to handle at 60 FPS, and the average dropped down to 49 FPS. In conclusion, 1440p and 1080p without upscaling are your best bet. Now for something a little older, GTA 5. Something to consider is that this was recorded when the enhanced version didn't exist, so this is the original version, or as it is now called, Legacy Edition. Being such an old title, I didn't even test 1080p, since it runs so great. At 1440p Ultra, without any upscaling, it ran with an average of 73 FPS, while at 4K, it averaged 51 FPS. With some tweaks, I'm sure it can run at 60. The last game I tested was Helldivers 2. This is another title that I think is somewhat CPU bottlenecked, because during gameplay I almost never saw 60 FPS, no matter the resolution or graphic settings I set it to. That led me to sticking to the Steam Deck preset. With 1080p native, I was able to run the game with 52 FPS, trickling down to 40 at 4K with FSR performance. Of course, you could set a higher preset if you don't mind playing at lower frame rates. Overall, I do believe that this is still a very nice machine. Except ray tracing only titles, it can run whatever you please at respectable settings and frame rates. You just have to be a little more open to spending a few minutes in the settings screen tweaking all of the options. And unlike the previous build, this is much nicer to look at. But I know what you all might be saying. You can definitely build something better for less now, no? And you would be absolutely correct. About a month ago, I built this machine. It might not be a looker, but there's quite a bit of a difference performance-wise. It has a Ryzen 5 3600, a better motherboard, a faster GPU, at the cost of VRAM, and a proper PSU at the cost of less storage. All of that for 259 euros. So maybe it isn't the best of the best anymore, but as seen in the benchmarks, it's still a pretty good deal. And down the line, you also have quite a lot of headroom for upgrades. The AM4 platform still offers great CPUs, and the strong PSU also gives room for a faster, more power-hungry graphics card. That's all I have to say for this machine. For those that want to watch more of my content, I would like to say one more thing. As I mentioned, this whole video was started way back in 2024. And it's not the only one. There are two more projects that I plan on releasing eventually. One will be uploaded after this video, while the other still has some issues that I have to deal with. That means that the following video will be older content like this one, and after it I will finally start releasing new stuff. At least until college starts again. Hopefully during this time I will also finish the second project. So yeah, thanks for watching, and until all of that happens, see ya.